Now, the other form we talk about is standard form. You've probably seen this many times in the past however many years. And in past years, we've had two versions of this, standard form and IB standard form. Now, since you are now in an IB class, it is always going to be the IB version from now on. We're just going to say standard form, and every time I mean the IB version. So let's write that. All the time, IB version, which is this. AX plus BY plus C equals 0. You don't have to put that slash through it. I like to because there's a lot of letters. You've probably also seen them as capital letters. And it's really just the same thing. It's kind of just the style, depends on what IB writes on their tests. And once again, this C variable here, both capital and lowercase, can be other variables. And you'll see that on your worksheet today as well. Now, this is the mistake a lot of people make with standard form. A lot of times people look at this form and say, I want to just look through my work and know exactly what A, B, and C are. That A is 10, B is 5, and C is 2.2. You cannot do that. You cannot just look at your work and know exactly what each variable is going to be. Now, we do got to talk about this form a little bit because there's some rules you have to follow. First thing is it has to be in the correct order, which is this order. X plus Y plus C equals 0. Must be in this order completely. No ifs, ands, or buts. The second thing, no fractions are allowed. Third, no decimals are allowed. If there are fractions or decimals, you're going to have to do some multiplication to the entire equation. That way we all have integers. And the last thing is that A, the first coefficient, the coefficient for X, must be positive. Meaning, if it's negative, you're going to multiply the entire equation by -1 or divide everything by -1 in order to make that first coefficient positive. Now, a lot of times in your homework, especially in your homework and in IB, you will see that the question will say, write the equation in the form AX plus BY plus D, there's that other letter there, equals 0, where A, B, and D, whatever 3 letters we have, and then we have these really weird symbols here. This weird looking E just means in the set of. That's all that means. And this weird looking Z here means an integer. Integers are their counting numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, and then the negatives, -1, -2, -3. So no fractions, no decimals, which is kind of our rules here. The only thing you have to know is that A has to be positive. If you make it negative, you will probably be losing at least 1 point. That's what this means, that my 3 variables are part of the integer set, are in the integers. Now, let's do an example with this. So line L2 this time, meaning the second line we're talking about, has a gradient of -2/3. and it goes through 2, 5 halves. Goes through that point there. So we have our gradient and a point, meaning we're going to use the point gradient form. The question tells us what form to use. So let's go ahead and substitute what we know. Point gradient form is y minus y1, which is 5 halves, equals our gradient, negative 2/3, times the quantity x minus x1, which is 2 in this case. And to reiterate, x and y are still present here in this equation. Now, read directions, and you're going to have to do math mostly in order to put it in a specific form. So, if it wants us to put it in slope-intercept form, what we're going to do is distribute. Pretty straightforward. Then we need to get y by itself. So we're going to add this 5 halves to the other side. Now, in order to add these two fractions, they have to have a common denominator, which, between the denominators 3 and 2, means that they're both going to have a denominator of 6. So this first fraction will multiply by 2, which gives us a numerator of 8. And the second fraction will multiply by 3 to give us a numerator of 15. And we add those together. Don't let fractions freak you out. Fractions are friends, not food. And there we have another form, y equals mx plus b. Now, if the question says that it wants it in standard form, or has this wording here, in the form ax plus by plus d equals 0, where a, b, and d are in the set of integers, this work is still valid. All we're going to do now is move everything to one side. So I'm going to add 2/3 x to the other side of the equal sign. Y is still here, and we'll subtract this fraction. That way our equation equals 0. Now, right now we have it in the correct form, or the correct order, which is awesome. But remember, there's no fractions and no decimals. So what we have to do is multiply this entire equation by something. And essentially, you want to multiply the entire equation by the LCM, the least common multiple of the 2 denominators, or 3 denominators that we'll see. So between 3 and 6, multiples of 3 are 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and so on. Multiples of 6 are 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, and so on. Now, the first number that they both have in common is 6. That means we're going to multiply the entire equation by 6. When we do that, we get 6 times 2, which is 12, and divide that by 3, gives us 4x. We get to multiply 6 by y, and then when we multiply 6 by this fraction, the 6's cancel out, and we're just left with a negative 23. Now there's no fractions, no decimals, everything's in the correct order, and a is positive. If it happened to be negative, we just need to do one more step, and then we would be done. Ta-da!